The Charleston sun filtered softly through sheer curtains, painting golden stripes across the old pine floors of Megan Clark's childhood bedroom. The walls, still decorated with faded posters of the Carolina coast and high school memories, seemed to close in around her as she sat in front of her vanity mirror, silent and still except for the nervous rise and fall of her chest. She wore a dress she'd dreamed about for years, crisp white, lace details, the kind of thing you never believe will actually be yours until the zipper is fastened and the veil is pinned. But the vision in the mirror didn't look like any bride she'd ever imagined. Her eyes, usually sparkling and bold, looked uncertain, shadowed by worry. At her feet, on a worn-out braided rug, lay Atlas, her 13-year-old German shepherd, his muzzle graying, his eyes cloudier than they once were, but still full of that steady loyalty that had carried Megan through every chapter of her life. He shifted, tried to lift himself, and whimpered quietly. Megan reached down, smoothing her palm over the patch of fur on his head, where his markings had faded into snowy white. He used to bound around this room like a tornado. Now every movement looked like a negotiation with pain. The house was chaos. Somewhere down the hall, Megan's mother called out orders. "Where's the bouquet? Has anyone seen the ring box? Who's watching the flower girl?" The scent of fresh coffee and panic drifted up the stairs, mingling with the sweet perfume of gardenias from the wedding bouquet waiting on the dresser. Megan's mother bustled into the room, breathless, her hands full of pins and tissues. She smiled at Megan, but her eyes flashed with that same motherly worry. "Honey, let me fix your veil. And your mascara. Oh, sweetheart, you're going to make me cry too if you look at me like that." She laughed nervously, fussing with Megan's hair, but Megan's attention drifted downward, always returning to Atlas. He tried to sit, his paws scrabbling at the floor, and let out a ragged breath. Megan's heart twisted. "I think he's having a hard morning," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "He's probably just picking up on the excitement," her mom said, kneeling beside Atlas and scratching behind his ears. "Dogs get anxious when things change. Isn't that right, old man?" Atlas wagged his tail once, an echo of his puppy days, but the motion looked exhausting. Megan leaned in, pressing her forehead gently against his. "It's going to be okay, buddy. You're coming with us. You always do." Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Harper, Megan's best friend since college and today's maid of honor, popped into the doorway in a flurry of pale blue silk and wild curls. She clutched a coffee cup in one hand, Megan's phone in the other. "Bride check," Harper grinned, but the smile faded as she glanced at Atlas, then back at Megan. "Did he eat?" Megan shook her head. "He just sniffs it. He wouldn't even touch the peanut butter treat, the one he'd normally knock the bowl over for." Harper's brow furrowed. She crouched down, offering Atlas a piece of bacon wrapped in a napkin. He sniffed, looked away, and closed his eyes. "First time ever?" Harper asked quietly. Megan nodded, her pulse thudding in her ears. From downstairs, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses mingled with the clamor of the morning. But here, the only sound was Atlas's strained breathing, a slow rhythm that didn't belong in a room meant for celebration. Megan could barely hear her mother's voice anymore, or the distant hum of the air conditioning, or the drone of wedding prep. Her whole world narrowed to the dog at her feet, and the knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Her father peeked in, tie crooked, face flushed with excitement. "It's time to go, sweetheart. The car's ready. Jason's waiting at the church." He looked at Megan, then Atlas, and hesitated. "You good?" Megan swallowed hard. She thought about saying she was fine, that she just needed a minute. Instead, she blinked back tears and managed a tight smile. Almost ready, Dad. Her parents filed out, leaving Megan and Harper alone. Harper leaned in, lowering her voice. Are you sure he's up for this? I mean, the church, the crowds, the heat. Megan squeezed Harper's hand. He has to be there. I need him there. He's been to every big moment of my life. Why should today be different? Harper nodded, biting her lip, glancing once more at Atlas. Okay. But if you need to change the plan, you let me know. We do whatever you need, Meg. Whatever Atlas needs. Atlas shifted again, letting out a low, restless sigh. Megan's stomach churned. She knelt beside him, careful not to wrinkle her dress, and pressed her face into his neck, breathing in the scent of old fur and comfort. I love you, Atlas. Just hold on a little longer, okay? You and me together. Downstairs, the bridal car honked, a final impatient warning. Megan dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, stood, and let Harper fluff her skirt and adjust her veil. She tried to smile, tried to look like the bride she'd always dreamed of being, but her mind kept looping. What if this is the last time he sees me like this? What if this is the last big moment we share? Atlas rose slowly, following her out the door, his head held high in spite of everything. As Megan walked down the stairs, the noise of the house seemed to hush for just a moment. The wedding guests, the laughter, the excitement, all faded into the background. There was only Atlas, her steadfast companion, struggling to keep pace with a world moving too fast for him. Outside, the sky was a perfect blue. The neighbors waved as Megan stepped into the sunlight, her dress glowing. Atlas followed, paused scraping the porch, and settled beside her in the car, head in her lap, breathing shallow but content. For a moment, Megan let herself believe everything would be okay. But as the car pulled away, she couldn't shake the fear pressing in on her heart. Maybe it wasn't just her wedding day on the line. Maybe it was the last chapter in a story that had started with a scared little puppy and a lonely young woman, a story she wasn't ready to end. As they turned onto the old oak-lined road toward the church, Megan stared out the window, clutching Atlas's paw in her hand, her heart pounding with the terrible question she couldn't say aloud. Will this be the last time Atlas sees me in white? The answer waited, just out of reach, as Charleston shimmered in the morning sun, and the day, once so certain, unraveled before her eyes. The Clark family's silver SUV rolled quietly through the leafy streets of Charleston, windows down to let in the morning air. Inside, the mood was a strange mixture of celebration and concern. A wedding party forced to squeeze into a car not meant for tulle and tuxedos, with Atlas taking up nearly half the back seat beside Megan. Megan's wedding dress pooled around her legs, the lace crinkling as she shifted to make room for Atlas's head in her lap. She stroked his ears, her eyes fixed on the traffic ahead. Atlas's breathing was shallow, his gaze unfocused. Every so often, he would lift his head as if trying to catch a scent or a memory in the wind, then settle again, exhausted. Her father drove, glancing into the rearview mirror every few seconds. Megan's mother sat up front, clutching the bouquet in her lap, knuckles white. Jason's tuxedo jacket was draped over the seat next to Megan, his phone chiming with messages from friends and family, wondering where they were. Harper, still in her bridesmaid's dress, squeezed into the third row with the ring bearer and flower girl, humming a lullaby in a shaky voice to keep the kids calm. Megan tried to steady her breathing. The old church was only a few blocks away, its steeple visible through the live oaks that lined the street. Her stomach tightened with every turn. She looked down at Atlas, whispering, "Hang in there, boy. We're almost there. Just a little longer." The car pulled up to the curb outside the church. Friends and family milled on the steps, some waving, some checking their watches. Megan took a deep breath, smoothed her veil, and shifted, ready to step out into the next chapter of her life. But as she opened the door and moved to slide out, Atlas shifted suddenly, blocking her with his body. At first, Megan thought he was just being affectionate, trying to stay close. But when she tried to nudge him aside, he pressed against her legs, whining, his paws planted firmly on the floor mat. "Atlas, what are you doing?" Megan tried to coax him, but Atlas only pressed closer, his breathing growing faster. Jason appeared at the door, hand outstretched, smiling through the nerves. "Come on, babe. Everybody's waiting." He reached in, patting Atlas's head, trying to ease him back. But Atlas growled, a soft, desperate sound, not angry, but afraid. He stared up at Megan, eyes wide and pleading. Megan's mother tried to intervene, her voice rising in gentle panic. "Atlas, sweetheart, let Megan out. It's okay, we have to go." But the old dog wouldn't move, his whole body trembled. Megan could see his ribs with every breath. She bent down, her dress tangling around her knees. "Hey, what's wrong?" Her voice cracked as she looked into Atlas's eyes. For a split second, she wasn't the bride. She was just a little girl again, begging her best friend not to leave her. Atlas's chest heaved. He tried to lift his head, but couldn't. A drool string slipped from his mouth onto Megan's dress. She didn't care. She wiped it away, fighting the wave of fear rising inside her. Jason, face flushed with confusion and embarrassment, tried to tug Atlas aside, but Megan put up a hand. "Don't! Look at his eyes. He's scared, Jason. He's never acted like this, not once." Atlas let out a deep, rattling breath and collapsed onto Megan's lap, his body limp. Megan's heart dropped. For a moment, the world froze, her parents standing outside the car, Jason holding the bouquet, guests starting to murmur, a little boy on the church steps pointing at the commotion. But Megan saw none of it. All she could see was Atlas, fighting for every breath. Panic clawed at her throat. Something's wrong. Seriously wrong. He's not just tired, he's in pain. She glanced at Jason, eyes wide with terror. He didn't eat breakfast. He wouldn't even take a treat. He's never done that, not ever. Jason's hand tightened on hers. "Do you want me to call Dr. Wells?" His voice was calm, but Megan could hear the fear beneath it. Harper leaned forward from the back seat, phone already out. "I'll do it. I'll call the vet right now." Atlas's head lolled in Megan's lap, his tongue slipping out between his teeth. Megan bit back a sob, her hands trembling as she stroked his ears. The church bells began to ring, their sound bright and celebratory. It felt cruel, almost mocking. She could hear guests murmuring, could see the pastor waiting at the entrance. Her wedding was supposed to start in 10 minutes. She made a decision. "We're not going to the church," Megan said, voice shaking. "We're going to the emergency vet, now. I'm not leaving him. Not for anything. Not even this." Jason looked shocked for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, whatever you need. We'll explain to everyone. I'll drive." Her mother, tears brimming, reached for her hand. "Megan, are you sure? The guests, the flowers, everything is ready." Megan cut her off, her voice steady now. "Atlas is family. He's been there for me every day of my life. I'm not going to leave him now, Mom. Not today." Without another word, Megan gathered Atlas in her arms as best she could, holding his head close. Jason ran around to the driver's seat. Harper called the vet, her voice tight and urgent, and Megan's parents climbed back in, silent and pale. As the car peeled away from the church, guests watched in confusion, whispers spreading like wildfire through the crowd. The bride, leaving her own wedding in a flurry of white satin and panic. Inside the car, it was quiet except for Atlas's labored breathing and the distant sound of the church bells fading behind them. Megan pressed her face to Atlas's fur, whispering, "I'm here. I'm not leaving you. You're my family, too." Jason reached over, squeezing her hand, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror. "We'll make it. Hang on, Atlas. Just a little bit longer, buddy." The SUV sped through the streets, red lights blurring into green, wedding dreams dissolving into something more urgent and raw. As Megan clung to Atlas, the reality of the day shifted. This wasn't the wedding she'd imagined, but it was the one that mattered most. The city seemed to blur past the windows as the SUV hurtled through Charleston's early morning streets, the usual slow southern pace abandoned for urgency. Megan sat in the back, wedding dress crumpled and stained, her arms cradling Atlas's head. Every pothole, every jolt of the car sent tremors through her body, but she barely noticed. Her entire world had narrowed to the old German shepherd beside her. The uneven rhythm of his breath, the dull glaze in his brown eyes, the way his big chest rose and fell, as if each inhalation cost him more than the last. Jason drove, one hand gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckle tension, the other reaching back to squeeze Megan's shoulder every so often, grounding her in this impossible reality. "Hang on, Atlas. Hang on, bud," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. Harper sat beside Megan, her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in a tense whisper to the receptionist at Dr. Wells's clinic. "We're on our way. He's not responding. He won't eat. He's panting and—" Yes, I'll tell her to hurry. Thank you." Megan couldn't help but remember the first time she'd ever seen Atlas. He was a scrappy, frightened puppy at the animal shelter, hiding in the back of his kennel, ears flattened, trembling. She'd been 18 then, broken-hearted over her parents' divorce, looking for someone, to help her feel less alone. The staff warned her, "He's a challenge. He might never trust anyone." But when she knelt down and whispered, "It's okay, buddy, I'm here," Atlas crawled into her lap and stayed. He'd been her shadow ever since, seeing her through college, law school, breakups, victories, and every storm in between. Now, it was her turn to whisper promises, her hand shaking as she stroked his fur. "I'm not leaving you, Atlas. You're my best friend. You're my family. I'm right here, okay?" Her mascara ran in inky streaks down her cheeks, staining the neckline of her dress. She didn't care. "We're going to get you help. Just hang on." The world outside was waking up. Dog walkers in the park, a couple out for a jog, an old man sweeping his porch. None of them knew what was happening inside the silver SUV. The drama unfolding on a day that was supposed to be about hope and beginnings. Inside, time stretched and bent around Megan's fear. She didn't notice the beauty of Charleston's historic homes, the Spanish moss, or the sunlight breaking through the live oaks. All she heard was Atlas's breathing, ragged and wet. Jason's phone buzzed on the dashboard. He checked it at a red light, then glanced at Megan in the mirror. "It's Dr. Wells," he said, voice careful. "She wants to know how far we are." Harper answered, "We're almost there. 5 minutes tops." Then she paused, listening intently. Her face went pale. "She says his symptoms sound very serious. We need to get there as fast as we can." Megan nodded, clutching Atlas tighter, her heart pounding in her chest. "Faster, Jason, please." He gunned the engine as the light changed, the car surging forward. Megan pressed her lips to Atlas's head, murmuring the story of their life together. Her first apartment, Atlas sleeping at her feet through every all-nighter in law school, the time he stood between her and an angry neighbor. how he'd snuggled her through every heartbreak, how he'd made her believe in loyalty when everything else felt uncertain. She remembered walking along the beach, Atlas's tail wagging in the surf, his whole body alive with joy. But this morning, all that seemed like another lifetime. Jason reached back again, squeezing her hand. "It's going to be okay, Meg. If we miss the wedding, we'll do it later. It's not important right now." His eyes flickered with pain and understanding. "He's more than just a pet. I know that." Megan tried to smile through her tears. "I don't care about the wedding. I care about Atlas. I just want him to be okay." Harper, fighting tears of her own, reached over and rested a hand on Megan's knee. "You're doing everything you can, Meg. He knows you love him." The car screeched around the last corner. Megan caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window, her wedding dress wrinkled and dirty, her makeup smeared, her face twisted with worry. She thought of the hours she'd spent planning every detail of this day, every flower, every song, every minute. None of it mattered now. Only Atlas mattered. Suddenly, Atlas lifted his head, his nose twitching. He stared up at Megan, eyes wide and searching. For a split second, he looked just like that scared puppy again, unsure, hoping she could fix what was wrong. Megan pressed her forehead to his. "You saved me, Atlas. All those years ago you saved me. Let me save you now, please." The clinic came into view, a low building with white siding and a bright red door. Jason pulled into the parking lot so fast the tires squealed. Before the car had even stopped moving, Megan was unbuckling herself, carefully cradling Atlas's head, trying to lift him without hurting him more. Harper ran inside, shouting for help. Within seconds, Dr. Wells and 2 vet techs rushed out with a gurney. Megan tried to stand, but her legs wobbled beneath her. Jason caught her, helping her steady Atlas as the vet team lifted him onto the gurney. Dr. Wells, her face grave, looked Megan in the eyes. "We'll take care of him. Please wait inside. We'll come get you as soon as we know more." The doors swung shut. Megan, breathless and trembling, leaned into Jason's arms, her wedding dress now streaked with dirt and Atlas's fur. The moment felt surreal. A bride at the vet, clinging to her fiancé in the waiting room, the smell of antiseptic and fear filling the air. Harper sank into a plastic chair beside Megan, her face streaked with tears. "He's a fighter, Meg. He always has been." Megan nodded, but her thoughts spun in circles. She remembered Atlas as a puppy, how he'd licked her tears when she thought her family was breaking apart. She remembered nights in college, curled up together on the couch, his steady breathing helping her through the panic of exams. She remembered the first time Jason met Atlas, how the big dog had immediately leaned into Jason's hand, trusting him as if he knew they were all going to be family. Now all Megan could do was wait. She pressed her hands together, praying silently. "Please, just let me have a little more time. Let him know how much he's loved. Don't let his last memory be fear." The waiting room felt frozen in time, silent except for the distant hum of the air conditioner, the soft sniffles of Harper beside her, Jason's warm hand resting on her back. Megan's parents arrived, pale and anxious, offering water and tissues, but Megan barely heard them. Her mind was a reel of memories and fears. The shelter, the beach, the Christmas mornings, the thunderstorms. Every moment Atlas had been her companion and guardian. She knew, deep down, that love was sometimes about letting go, but her heart rebelled. She wasn't ready. Not yet. Finally, the receptionist called her name. Dr. Wells was waiting just beyond the door, her face solemn. "Come with me, Megan. We need to talk about Atlas." Megan stood, her legs unsteady, and followed. Behind her, Jason and Harper rose too, united in this terrible, beautiful moment. The next chapter was out of her hands, and all she could do was hope. The harsh fluorescent lights of the animal clinic's waiting area made everything look too real, too stark. Megan sat in a plastic chair, her wedding dress crumpled around her like a deflated balloon. Mud stained the hem. A thread of lace had unraveled, and there was a faint smudge of blood from Atlas's paw on her skirt. None of it mattered. All her attention was fixed on the door that led to the exam rooms, the place where the vet staff had rushed Atlas only moments before. Jason sat beside her, one arm draped protectively across her shoulders, his tuxedo rumpled, hair mussed from running his hands through it again and again. Harper hovered nearby, trying to offer tissues and water, but Megan's hands shook too much to accept anything. Her parents arrived, breathless and red-eyed, their relief at seeing Megan alive and unharmed immediately replaced by the familiar ache of parental helplessness. Her mother sat on her other side, taking Megan's hand in both of hers, squeezing, whispering, "You're so strong, honey, so strong," though her own lips trembled. Every sound in the room seemed to echo. The scratch of a pen at the receptionist's desk, the click of a door closing, the hum of a vending machine, and Megan's own thundering heartbeat. The sense of ceremony that had filled the morning had been stripped away. There were no flowers, no music, just the antiseptic smell of the clinic and the sterile anxiety of waiting. The family sat together, silent, connected by love and dread. Minutes blurred together. Megan replayed every detail of the morning in her head. She wondered if she could have done something differently. What if she'd noticed Atlas's pain sooner? What if she hadn't been so distracted with the wedding? Her mind spiraled with guilt and fear, each thought cutting deeper than the last. Jason squeezed her knee, grounding her. "He's tough, Meg. He's always been tough. He knows you're here." Harper tried to help by telling stories. How Atlas used to herd her away from the snack table at every party. How he once jumped into the lake after a tennis ball and scared everyone half to death. How he always seemed to know when Megan needed a nudge of his big, cold nose. Each memory brought a flicker of warmth, but also fresh tears. The exam room door opened. Dr. Wells stepped out, clipboard in hand, her usually warm face drawn and serious. She walked slowly, almost reverently, as if she understood that every step was changing the shape of Megan's world. "Can I talk to you, Megan?" she asked gently. Jason stood, ready to follow, but Megan shook her head. "I need to hear it first," she whispered. Jason nodded and let her go, squeezing her hand for courage. Megan followed Dr. Wells into a small office. There were photos on the wall, dogs and cats the clinic had saved, a rainbow bridge poem in a frame. Dr. Wells gestured to a chair, sat across from Megan, and spoke softly. "Atlas is a fighter, but his heart is very weak. He's developed a condition called dilated cardiomyopathy. It's severe and moving quickly. That's why he's struggling to breathe and refusing food." Megan swallowed hard. Is there anything you can do?" Dr. Wells's eyes softened. "We can make him comfortable for a little while. We can give medication to ease his pain. Maybe a few days, maybe a week. But the kindest thing might be to let him go while he still knows you're with him." "He's in pain, Megan. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, but it's the truth." Megan blinked back tears. She thought of all the times Atlas had pulled her through heartache, his quiet presence grounding her through storms she thought would never end. Was she supposed to just let go? Could she be strong enough to do what was best for him, even if it broke her heart? Dr. Wells placed a gentle hand on Megan's arm. He loves you, Megan. That's clear. He trusts you. He's holding on because you are. Whatever you decide, we'll support you. Megan closed her eyes, fighting to breathe. Her wedding day had dissolved into a fog of hospital rooms and impossible choices. She pressed her fists to her chest, feeling the ache beneath her ribs. "Can I see him?" "Of course," Dr. Wells said softly. Back in the waiting room, Megan relayed the news with a voice that barely carried above a whisper. Her parents wrapped her in a hug. Harper wept openly. Jason held her hand so tightly she thought her fingers would bruise. But Megan wasn't ready for goodbyes. Not yet. "Can we start the treatment?" Megan asked Dr. Wells, determination cutting through the fog. "I don't care about the dress, or the church, or the party. I want him to be comfortable. I want to stay with him as long as I can." Dr. Wells nodded, compassion shining in her eyes. "We'll get him settled. You can be with him the whole time. Let me get him ready for you." Minutes later, Megan stood at Atlas's side in a quiet, softly lit exam room. He lay on a thick, clean blanket, an IV in his foreleg, a floral collar, meant for the wedding, now resting gently around his neck. His breathing was steadier, the pain in his eyes replaced by a dreamy, peaceful calm brought on by the medication. Megan knelt beside him, her dress fanned out across the floor, and stroked the fur between his ears. "Hey, handsome boy," she whispered, tears falling onto his muzzle. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Jason entered quietly, sitting behind Megan and wrapping his arms around her. Her parents and Harper clustered in the doorway, a silent witness to this different kind of altar, a place where love meant not just holding on, but knowing when to let go. The minutes stretched, gentle and golden. Megan talked to Atlas about everything and nothing, about the beach, the house, the first time she brought him home. She told him about the time he barked at Jason on their first date, how she knew then that Jason was worth keeping, because Atlas never trusted anyone so quickly. She whispered her gratitude for every moment, every adventure, every comfort he'd ever given her. The wedding day had become something else entirely, an altar not of vows and celebration, but of reflection and trust. Megan realized that the most important promises weren't spoken in churches, but whispered on clinic floors, in the dark moments when love was measured by presence and sacrifice. Dr. Wells returned with more medication and explained what to expect. She knelt beside Megan, her voice gentle. "You can stay as long as you need. There's no rush." Megan nodded. She felt the sorrow, but also a quiet hope. There would be time for goodbyes, but also for gratitude. She chose to stay, chose to be Atlas's family right to the end. And for the first time that day, Megan felt a sense of peace. She didn't know how long they had, but she would spend every moment by his side. The late morning sun filtered through the slatted blinds of the animal clinic's private room, painting pale stripes across Atlas's fur and the wrinkled folds of Megan's wedding dress. Outside, the world spun on. Cars rushed by, phones buzzed with missed calls and apologetic texts from wedding guests. And somewhere across town, a church sat quietly, empty pews adorned with flowers waiting for a bride who would not arrive. But in this quiet room, time had paused. Atlas lay on a blanket on the floor, his breathing softer now, comforted by the medication. His floral collar, hastily arranged by Harper from the bouquet Megan had left on the dashboard, gave him a kind of dignity, old, loyal, and honored. Megan sat cross-legged beside him, her dress now a symbol of something different. Not the perfect wedding, but fierce, unconditional love. She ran her fingers through his fur, whispering stories and apologies, gratitude and heartbreak. Jason watched Megan, his chest aching with a cocktail of pride and helplessness. He glanced at Dr. Wells, then at Megan's parents and Harper, all gathered in a loose half-circle around the little altar fate had chosen for them. It wasn't the ceremony anyone had expected, but somehow, as the sunlight fell softly on Atlas and Megan, it felt like the only place that mattered. After a while, Jason knelt down beside Megan, careful not to crowd her. "I think we should postpone," he said quietly, searching her face. "There's no way you're up for vows and dancing right now. We can reschedule, do it right. Your family will understand." Megan looked up, tears glinting in her lashes. She shook her head. "No. I don't want to wait. Atlas is family, Jason. He's been there for every big moment of my life. I want him here, even if it's just for this one. Even if it's not the wedding we planned." Her voice, though raw, carried conviction. For a moment, the whole room went still. Dr. Wells, wiping away a tear, nodded in understanding. "We can give you a few minutes. If you'd like, we could be your witnesses." Megan's mother pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "This is beautiful, sweetheart. If you're sure—" Megan squeezed Atlas's paw. "I'm sure. This is what feels right." Harper's eyes lit up with a mix of grief and excitement. She dug in her purse for the wedding rings, clutching them as if they were precious relics. "I'll record it," she whispered. "You need to remember this moment." Jason helped Megan to her feet. He took her hands, drawing her gently to stand over Atlas, who lifted his head, alert for the first time in hours, as if sensing that something important was about to happen. Dr. Wells and the clinic staff gathered quietly at the back of the room, joining Megan's parents and Harper in a makeshift congregation. Jason cleared his throat, his voice shaking but strong. "I didn't write vows for this. I thought I'd be saying them in front of 100 people in a church. But the truth is, this is better, because you taught me. Love isn't about a party or perfect plans. It's about showing up every day for the people and the dogs you care about. I promise to do that for you, for Atlas, for our family, always." Megan's tears fell freely now, but she smiled, a true luminous smile, brighter than the morning sun. "I thought today was about starting something perfect," she replied, voice trembling. "But Atlas reminded me that life is messy, unpredictable, and the people we love deserve us at our realest, not our most polished. I promise to love you and be present, no matter what. And I promise to carry Atlas's loyalty and courage in my heart, always." Harper stifled a sob behind the phone camera. Megan's mother clung to her father, both crying and grinning at once. Even Dr. Wells dabbed her eyes. Then, in the stillness, Atlas pushed himself up with shaky determination. He lifted his paw and placed it gently in Megan's lap. The gesture was simple, but it felt like a blessing. A final, silent vow from the dog who had given Megan so much. Jason reached for the rings, slipping one onto Megan's finger. Then she did the same for him. "I do," he said, voice thick with emotion. Megan nodded, unable to speak but radiating her answer in every tear and every touch. Applause broke out, quiet but joyful. Harper snapped a few photos. Megan in her wrinkled dress, Jason in his half-buttoned shirt, Atlas between them, all of them bound together by something far deeper than tradition or expectation. Harper shared the video to close friends, the story spreading quickly. Messages poured in, expressions of awe, empathy, and support. Strangers, wedding guests, and old friends wrote that they'd never seen a ceremony so honest or so moving. As the room settled, Megan knelt beside Atlas, kissing his nose. "You're part of this family, always. Thank you for getting me here, for holding on. She laid her cheek on his head, feeling the slow thud of his heart. The families gathered close, sharing stories. Megan's father recounted how Atlas once saved Megan from stepping in front of a car. Harper remembered late nights in college when Atlas stood guard while they walked home. Even the clinic staff contributed, telling of how Atlas greeted them with gentle curiosity, never fear. For a while, grief and joy mingled in the little room. There was no music, no reception, no grand speeches, just the quiet affirmation that love is sometimes fiercest when plans fall apart. Megan and Jason had not married at the altar they'd chosen, but they'd found a more sacred one, sanctified by loyalty and shared sorrow. As the afternoon drifted on, Megan rested with Atlas, the ring now heavy and comforting on her finger. Jason sat beside them, arm around Megan, hand resting on Atlas's back. The entire family, and even the vet staff, circled around, a spontaneous community forged in crisis. In that room, love was not about the spectacle or the dress or even the future. It was about bearing witness to each other's pain, making room for hope and memory. For Megan and Jason, the wedding had not just survived disaster, it had become something unforgettable. The days after the clinic wedding slipped into a rhythm that felt both suspended and sharply real, every moment colored by the awareness that time was running out. Megan and Jason didn't go on a honeymoon. They canceled dinner reservations, returned borrowed tuxedos, and left unopened gifts stacked in the living room. The wedding photos were still on Harper's phone, not yet printed, but none of that mattered. The center of their world had shifted. Everything now revolved around Atlas. Atlas returned home with them that afternoon, his body lighter but his spirit calmer. The medications Dr. Wells prescribed brought him moments of peace. He could rest, eat a little, even wag his tail. But Megan knew these were borrowed days. She treated each one like a rare gem. Every morning began on the living room floor. Megan and Jason set out thick blankets and pillows, refusing to let Atlas sleep alone. Sometimes Jason would wake up to find Megan lying beside Atlas, one hand draped protectively over his chest, as if she could shield him from what was coming just by being close enough. Sometimes Atlas would wake before them, his head on Megan's shoulder, gazing at her with wise, tired eyes. The newlyweds made new routines, measured not by calendar appointments or work deadlines, but by Atlas's needs. They fed him by hand, offering bits of roasted chicken, the only thing he seemed to want. When Atlas grew restless, Megan would bundle up and take him to the porch, sitting with him beneath the crepe myrtle as the sun climbed above the rooftops. She'd whisper stories in his ear, memories of his puppy days, the time he chewed up her acceptance letter to law school, how he once barked so loud at the TV that Megan's mother had called the cable company to complain about the volume. In the afternoons, Megan and Jason looked at old photos together. Atlas running in the surf, Atlas covered in snow, Atlas curled up between Megan's feet while she worked late nights at her desk. Megan laughed and cried, sometimes in the same breath. Jason told Atlas about their first date, when the big dog had tried to sit in his lap to judge his character. "You picked well, Atlas," Jason would say, and Megan would nod, grateful that love, dog and human, had woven them into a family. Sometimes Harper would stop by after work, bringing cookies or flowers, and they'd all sit on the floor and talk. Megan's parents came over in the evenings, helping cook simple meals and sharing memories. They told stories of Atlas as a guard dog, how he'd barked away a raccoon in the backyard, or the time he sat patiently at the kitchen door during every family gathering, hoping for leftovers. These stories, shared and reshared, became a kind of soft shield against the dread Megan felt whenever Atlas coughed or refused food. As the week passed, Megan kept a journal, determined to remember every detail. She wrote about the small, perfect joys, Atlas's tail thumping against the floor when she came home, the way he still perked up when Jason jingled his car keys, the sound of his snores in the dead of night. She captured the moments when Atlas's old spark would flare, a short game of tug-of-war, a bark at the mailman, a gentle nudge of his nose under her hand. One evening, the family took Atlas for a walk on the beach. The tide was low, the sun turning the water to gold. Megan walked barefoot, her wedding ring catching the light, Atlas plodding along at her side. Jason carried a folding chair, and they sat together watching the waves. For a while, Atlas seemed almost young again, his ears up, nose twitching with excitement at the salty breeze. As darkness fell, Megan knelt beside him, pressing her face into his neck. "Thank you for being here, Atlas," she whispered. "Thank you for every single day." She knew he understood. He always had. The sand clung to her dress, the air was heavy with salt, and the moment became another memory for the journal, a chapter she would read again and again. At home, Atlas grew weaker, sleeping more often, sometimes waking in confusion. Megan didn't try to pretend everything was fine. She let herself grieve, even as she cherished what was left. She found comfort in caring for him, in bearing witness to his final days, refusing to let him leave the world alone or unnoticed. Jason joined her in this gentle vigil. He learned to give Atlas his pills, how to stroke his chest in just the right way to calm him during coughing fits. He worked from home, pausing meetings so Atlas wouldn't be alone. They all adapted, living for Atlas, putting aside their own plans for his comfort. One night, Megan's parents brought over a box of old photos. They sat together in a circle, showing Atlas pictures of his puppyhood, of long-ago Christmas mornings, beach trips, and summer barbecues. Megan's father told the story of the day Atlas pulled Megan out of the street, saving her from a speeding car. "You always were a hero," he said, voice thick with pride. Jason leaned close, his voice barely above a whisper. "I used to think a wedding was the most important day of my life. But it's not. This is. These days with you, Megan, with Atlas. This is what matters." Megan rested her head on Jason's shoulder. "It doesn't matter how much time we have. What matters is how we spend it." Harper sent over the viral video of their wedding in the clinic. Comments poured in, messages from strangers who said the story moved them to tears, who said it reminded them to hold their loved ones close, to never take a day for granted. Megan was surprised by the way their pain connected to others, how Atlas's story rippled outward, touching people they would never meet. But most of all, Megan noticed the subtle change in herself and Jason. The idea of a perfect wedding faded into irrelevance. It didn't matter that the cake was uneaten or the bouquets wilted. The vows they'd spoken over Atlas's gentle breathing felt more sacred than anything she could have scripted. Atlas had shaped all of them, not just Megan. Jason, once reluctant about dogs, was now the first to suggest a walk or to check on Atlas in the night. Harper found herself volunteering at the animal shelter on weekends. Even Megan's parents, once skeptical about a big dog in the house, now slipped him treats and whispered thanks for watching over their daughter. Every day was a gift, each one slower and softer than the last, filled with gratitude, tears, and the quiet knowledge that love, real love, was found in presence, in sacrifice, in the unplanned grace of sharing even the hardest moments together. Night fell heavy over the Clark house, the kind of humid Charleston night that pressed in through old window frames and turned every breath slow and thick. In the living room, where Megan and Jason had camped out for the past week. Time seemed to stop. Shadows stretched across the floor, and only the soft, ragged sound of Atlas's breathing broke the stillness. Atlas had grown weaker by the day. That evening, he'd refused all food, even the special roast chicken Megan made just for him. He no longer had the energy to move from his spot beside the sofa, resting his head on Megan's foot, his eyes tracking her every movement. Jason sat close by, a silent anchor, offering whatever comfort he could. Megan felt every heartbeat in her chest, knowing what was coming but dreading it just the same. Around midnight, the gentle routine of pill bottles, whispered reassurances, and wet cloths gave way to something more urgent. Atlas whimpered, his chest heaving as he struggled to draw in air. Megan bolted upright, her heart hammering. "Jason!" Her voice cracked, panic slicing through the heavy quiet. Jason was instantly awake, moving to Atlas's side. Megan knelt, cradling Atlas's head in her lap, her hands trembling as she stroked the graying fur. "It's okay, baby, I'm here, I'm right here." She pressed her cheek to his head, feeling the warmth and the weight of his love one last time. Harper arrived minutes later, breathless and teary-eyed, still in her pajamas. She'd left her phone on just in case. Megan's parents followed, faces drawn and pale, quietly entering the room as if they were stepping into sacred space. Together they gathered on the porch, Megan carrying Atlas in her arms, wrapped gently in a soft quilt. The porch lights flickered, throwing golden halos onto the creaky floorboards. The night air was cool and alive with the sound of cicadas and distant ocean waves. Above them, the Charleston stars blinked, undisturbed by the grief below. Megan sat on the porch swing, holding Atlas close. Jason, Harper, and her parents surrounded her in a protective circle. She felt Atlas's chest rise and fall, slower now, every breath a mountain to climb. Tears streaked Megan's face, but her voice was steady. "You're safe. You're loved. You'll never be alone, not ever." She pressed kisses to his ears, his nose, the soft spot between his eyes where worry always melted away. Jason sat beside Megan, his arm around her shoulders. Harper rested her hand on Atlas's back. Megan's parents each shared a story, her mother remembering the first time Atlas guarded Megan's room all night when she was sick. Her father talking about the day Atlas barked down the neighbor's aggressive dog, refusing to leave Megan's side. Harper shared how Atlas always knew when she needed a friend, nudging her hand when she felt invisible in a crowd. They spoke softly, the memories overlapping and weaving together, a tapestry of love and gratitude. The porch became a place of ritual, of goodbye. The wind stirred the Spanish moss in the trees. Megan whispered into Atlas's ear, "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for being my heart." She promised him, promised herself, that he would never be forgotten, that every walk and sunrise and moment of courage would carry his spirit forward. Atlas's breaths grew shallower, the struggle easing as he relaxed into Megan's arms. Dr. Wells had told them what to expect, but nothing could prepare Megan for the ache of those last moments. She felt his body go still, his head heavy in her lap, the great heart that had been her constant companion growing quiet. It was Jason who broke the silence, his voice gentle. "He's at peace, Meg. He's not hurting anymore." Megan's sobs came in waves, grief crashing through her. She rocked Atlas gently, the old swing creaking under their weight. Harper leaned in, pressing her forehead to Megan's shoulder. Megan's mother wept openly, her father standing behind them, silent but steady. Yet beneath the pain, Megan felt something else, a fragile gratitude. Atlas had died surrounded by family, by stories and love and the stars above Charleston. He had not left this world alone or unloved. He'd gone with dignity, with the gentle touch of those he trusted most. Jason wrapped Megan in his arms, and together they held Atlas until dawn began to break. The night slowly gave way to a soft lavender light, birds waking in the trees. Megan let herself cry until she had no tears left. Then she just sat, her heart cracked open, but strangely at peace. When the sun finally peeked over the horizon, Megan reached for Jason's hand. "He was so good, wasn't he?" she whispered. Jason squeezed her hand. He was the best. They laid Atlas in the backyard beneath the old magnolia tree, his favorite spot for naps. Harper brought wildflowers, and Megan's mother read a poem about loyalty and grace. They buried him with his first toy, a battered blue tennis ball, and the floral collar from the wedding. Megan felt the loss like a missing limb, raw and deep. But as they stood together, arms around one another, she realized that love and grief had made them into something stronger, a family forged by loyalty and loss. In the days that followed, the house was quieter, each corner echoing with memories. Megan found herself reaching for Atlas's leash, expecting to hear the familiar tap of his claws on the floor. She cried in the shower, on the porch, curled up in the bed they'd shared those last few nights. But she also smiled, remembering his lopsided grin, the way he'd lean into her side when she was lonely, the bright bark that greeted her at the end of every day. Jason held Megan through it all. They talked about Atlas, shared their grief, and let the pain become a part of their story. Harper checked in every day, sometimes bringing coffee, sometimes just sitting with Megan on the porch, saying nothing at all. One evening, Megan took out her journal and wrote, "Atlas was my heart. Saying goodbye hurt more than anything, but loving him was worth every moment." She closed the book, breathing in the quiet strength that comes only when you've shown up for someone you love, even when it breaks you. She understood now. This was what true presence meant, bearing witness to the hardest chapters, refusing to look away, loving until the very end. Atlas's last days had not been about fear or loss, but about holding each other close, about saying goodbye with dignity and letting love outlast grief. And as night fell once more over Charleston, Megan knew her best friend's spirit would linger in every gentle wind, every loyal heart, every sunrise that marked a new beginning. The world seemed quieter in the weeks after Atlas's passing. The house felt bigger, the rooms echoing with memories. Megan found herself moving more slowly, drifting from task to task, unsure what to do with the empty hours that used to be filled with Atlas's needs. There were constant reminders. The water bowl by the kitchen door, the leash hanging on its hook, a well-loved blanket that still carried his scent. Sometimes, in the early morning, she would reach out in bed, expecting to find his warm body beside her, only to remember that he was gone. The ache of loss wasn't a sharp pain anymore. It was dull, heavy, a kind of homesickness for someone who'd been part of her every day. Grief came in waves, unexpected and unpredictable. Megan might be folding laundry or standing in the grocery store line when the urge to cry would overtake her, fierce and sudden. But there were other moments, too. Memories that made her laugh. Stories she was finally able to share with Jason and Harper without her voice breaking. Atlas's old collar became a kind of keepsake. Megan placed it gently on her nightstand, coiling it so the worn leather faced upward and the name tag caught the light. Each night, before she went to sleep, she would run her fingers along the metal letters. Sometimes she whispered goodnight, as if Atlas might still hear her from wherever loyal hearts go. Jason watched Megan with a gentle patience. He understood this quiet mourning, had his own way of carrying it. Sometimes he would find Megan sitting on the porch, staring at the empty yard, and he'd join her, resting his hand on hers. They didn't have to speak. Their silence was a kind of shared prayer, a way of honoring Atlas together. It was Jason who, after several weeks, spoke what Megan could not. He came home one afternoon with a small bundle of wildflowers from the park, setting them gently on the kitchen table. "He'd want you to help another lost soul," Jason said, his voice soft, a half-smile on his lips. "Atlas was never the only one out there who needed someone. And you have so much love to give." At first, Megan resisted the idea. The wound still felt raw, the idea of another dog almost a betrayal. "No one could ever replace him," she whispered, hugging her knees to her chest. Jason sat beside her on the floor, looking her straight in the eyes. "It isn't about replacing Atlas. It's about carrying forward what he gave you. You said once that he saved you. Maybe it's your turn now." The next day, Megan found herself driving to the Charleston Animal Shelter with Jason beside her, her heart pounding in her chest. The building was small, tucked between a row of sprawling oaks, but it was alive with noise, barking, laughter, the anxious whine of hopeful animals. She paused at the entrance, fighting back tears, then stepped inside. The shelter director greeted her with a kind smile. "We heard about your wedding," she said. "That story touched so many of us here. Would you like to meet some of our residents?" Megan nodded, letting Jason take her hand as they walked through the rows of kennels. There were dogs of every age and temperament, playful puppies, shy seniors, big shepherds, and tiny mutts. She found herself drawn to the older dogs, the ones who hung back when visitors passed, who watched with tired, hopeful eyes. One dog in particular caught her attention, a German shepherd mix with a salt and pepper muzzle, curled up in the far corner of his run. His name was Charlie, according to the sign. He was at least 10, the staff said, and he'd been overlooked for months because of his age and a slight limp. When Megan knelt by his kennel, Charlie lifted his head, watching her with cautious curiosity. Jason crouched beside her. "He reminds me of Atlas, but he's his own soul." Megan reached her fingers through the bars, and Charlie, after a moment's hesitation, shuffled forward and pressed his head into her palm. The touch was electric, a connection instant and deep. Megan felt her eyes fill with tears, but this time it was something softer than grief, a tremor of hope. They spent an hour with Charlie in the play yard, tossing a squeaky toy and sitting together in the patchy afternoon sun. Charlie didn't fetch, but he came to lean against Megan's side, settling his weight into her, trusting her with his frail body and heavy heart. By the end, Megan was laughing, really laughing, for the first time in weeks. Jason beamed at her, his eyes full of warmth and pride. The adoption process was quick. The staff, recognizing Megan from the wedding story, hugged her and pressed thank you notes into her hands. "Older dogs like Charlie. They need second chances," one volunteer whispered. "Thank you for seeing him." On the drive home, Charlie sat in the back seat, nervous at first, but slowly relaxing as Megan sang softly and Jason reassured him. Megan's heart ached, missing Atlas with every mile, but as Charlie gazed at her in the rearview mirror, she felt something new, a beginning blooming where grief had lived. At home, the adjustment was slow but sweet. Charlie was shy, unused to soft beds and quiet rooms. He had nightmares at first, barking at invisible threats, trembling in his sleep. Megan was patient, waking to comfort him, whispering to him in the dark that he was safe, that he belonged. Jason learned how to coax him into walks, how to toss treats gently, how to wait for Charlie to come to them in his own time. Harper visited, bringing treats and squeaky toys, crying happy tears when Charlie finally let her scratch his ears. Megan's parents brought over the old dog bed, washing it carefully so Charlie would have something that smelled like family. Slowly, the house filled with new routines: walks at sunset, napping in the sunlight, quiet evenings on the porch with Charlie's head resting on Megan's lap. Megan kept Atlas's collar on her nightstand, but she also put Charlie's up beside it, their names side by side. She told Charlie stories about Atlas, how brave and kind he was, how he taught her everything she knew about loyalty and love. And in those quiet days, Megan found herself healing. It didn't mean the pain was gone. Some nights she still cried, still reached for the space where Atlas used to be. But with every wag of Charlie's tail, every moment of trust, she felt the ache transform. It became gratitude, a deep, abiding thankfulness for the love she'd shared, and for the new love blooming in its place. She and Jason took Charlie back to the beach, letting him sniff the salt air, watch the waves, and walk the same stretch of sand where Atlas once ran free. Megan brought wildflowers, scattering them into the surf, whispering, "Thank you," to the wind, to Atlas, to life itself for giving her a second chance to love. And as Charlie leaned against her, old but hopeful, Megan understood. The best way to honor a legacy of love was to keep her heart open, to let the circle begin again. The months after Charlie joined their home moved with a gentler rhythm, each day infused with the memory of Atlas, but also the fresh hope that came with new beginnings. Megan discovered that loving again didn't mean letting go of the past. It meant carrying it forward, making something beautiful out of the ache. Her experience with Atlas, the wedding, the loss, the impossible choice, stayed with her, living in her bones. Sometimes, when she walked Charlie along the tree-lined streets of Charleston, neighbors would stop and ask about her famous dog wedding. Megan would smile, share the story, and often find herself tearing up with strangers on the sidewalk. What surprised her was how many people responded not just with sympathy, but with their own stories. Stories of dogs who changed their lives, of rescues and goodbyes, of the hard lessons and the unexpected joys of loving deeply. One bright Saturday morning, Megan made her way to the Charleston Animal Shelter, not as a visitor, but as a volunteer. She signed up to help with the weekend adoption event, hoping to give back in honor of Atlas and to offer hope to dogs like Charlie. Jason came too, happy to haul crates and refill water bowls, sometimes helping nervous dogs settle in with a soft pat and kind word. As Megan walked the rows of kennels that day, she spoke with the quiet authority of someone who'd been there, on the edge of heartbreak, and also on the other side. She told nervous families about Atlas, about how she almost didn't bring him home that first day, how he'd saved her as much as she'd saved him. "It's not about finding a perfect dog," she'd say. "It's about loving one for who they are, and letting them love you back. Sometimes the dog who needs you most is the one who changes your life." That afternoon, the shelter director invited Megan to speak at a small event. The community had heard about her story through social media, and now there was a crowd: families, adopters, other volunteers, even a few local reporters. Megan stood at the front of the room, heart thumping, Jason smiling at her from the back, Charlie waiting quietly by her side. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger with each word. "I used to think life was about the big moments, the perfect wedding, the dream job, the big house. But Atlas taught me the truth. Life is made in the small moments, the quiet presence at your side when you're at your worst, the loyalty that never wavers, no matter what." It's not perfection that matters, but presence, sacrifice, and love that lasts. She paused, looking down at Charlie, who watched her with trusting eyes. Atlas showed me what family really means. It's not just the people you're born with. It's the ones you choose, the ones you show up for, the ones you let into your heart, even when you know it might break. Atlas gave me everything he had. I hope I gave him the same. The audience was quiet, moved by the rawness of her words. Megan continued, "Losing Atlas was the hardest thing I've ever faced, but his legacy didn't end when he left. It began again. Every time I open my heart to someone new, every time I help a dog like Charlie, every time I show up for someone who needs me. That's how love works. It outlasts the pain, the loss, even death itself." She looked around at the families, the hopeful dogs in their kennels, the shelter staff beaming with pride. If there's one thing Atlas taught me, it's this: show up, love fiercely. Don't be afraid to open your heart, even if you know you'll have to say goodbye one day. Because the goodbye is never the end. It's just the start of a new story, a new life changed by kindness. After the speech, people gathered around to thank her. Some told their own stories of dogs who taught them about loyalty and forgiveness, about the way animals can heal wounds that people can't always see. The shelter director hugged Megan and said, "You're helping change minds about adopting senior dogs. People see what you did, and they realize how special these old souls can be." Inspired by her experience, Megan committed to volunteering regularly at the shelter. She started an outreach program, sharing her story in local schools and community centers. Harper helped her set up a website where families could share memories of their own rescue pets. The project grew. Soon, neighbors were fostering dogs, and local businesses pitched in to support families struggling with vet bills. Megan's living room filled with thank you cards, photos of adopted dogs, and even invitations to speak at animal rescue fundraisers. Megan noticed a change in herself as she spoke and wrote about Atlas and Charlie. She no longer talked only about loss and grief, but about the gifts that came from opening her heart. She wrote, "Atlas gave me the courage to risk loving again. Charlie taught me that healing is possible, even when you think your heart is too broken to try." Jason, too, found himself drawn deeper into this circle of compassion. He attended Megan's talks, helped with adoption fairs, and sometimes surprised her by bringing home a new bed or toy for Charlie. They laughed about the ways their home had changed, from a house built around wedding plans to one built around walks, dog hair, and second chances. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Megan and Jason would sit on the porch, Charlie at their feet, and talk about all they'd learned. Megan realized that the most profound bonds in life aren't forged in moments of joy, but in the willingness to sacrifice, to show up, to hold someone through the hardest nights. That's family, she'd say. Not just who you're born with, but who you choose. The ones you love enough to grieve for, and enough to love again. Megan saw how Atlas's story had a ripple effect in the community. More people came to the shelter asking to meet older dogs, asking for advice on how to care for pets at the end of their lives. The shelter director reported a record number of adoptions that month. The Atlas effect, they called it, laughing through happy tears. Looking back, Megan understood that loss was not the end of Atlas's story. His love lived on in every family that took a chance on an overlooked animal. Every child who learned the meaning of loyalty and courage. Every person who found hope on the other side of heartbreak. And so, the lessons of love and loyalty continued, woven into Megan's life, her community, and the world beyond. Atlas had given her a legacy, to open her heart, to love without fear, and to trust that every goodbye could be the beginning of something beautiful. A year passed, and Charleston was awash in early summer light once again. The city hummed with the same gentle magic it had always held. Salt air from the harbor, gardens blooming with wild color, the distant sound of music on the breeze. For Megan, Jason, and Charlie, the days had become rich with new rituals, gentle laughter, and a steadiness built on everything they'd survived together. The pain of losing Atlas never quite faded. It softened, its sharp edges rounded by time and memory. Megan carried him with her, in the quiet, in the sunlight, in the way her heart seemed to beat a little stronger when she thought of the dog who taught her the truest lessons about love. On the anniversary of Atlas's passing, Megan woke before dawn, unable to sleep through the swirl of old sorrow and new gratitude. She rose quietly, not wanting to disturb Jason or Charlie, and padded through the house to the kitchen. There, on the table, sat a simple envelope with her name written in Jason's handwriting. She opened it and smiled. Inside was a note. "Meet us at Atlas's beach. Sunrise, bring the wildflowers." By the time Megan reached the front porch, Jason was already waiting, coffee in hand, with Charlie sitting alert by his feet. The old dog's face was dusted with gray, but his eyes had brightened in the year since he'd found home. He wagged his tail at the sight of Megan, and Jason grinned. "Ready for our little pilgrimage?" The drive to the beach was peaceful, the city still asleep. The sky was the pale blue of early morning, streaked with pink. Megan clutched a bouquet of wildflowers, sunflowers, Queen Anne's lace, goldenrod, gathered from the garden Atlas had once trampled with puppy joy. She looked out at the familiar streets and felt the past and present weaving together. They reached the beach just as the horizon began to blush with the promise of sunrise. The air was cool and salty, the sand still damp from the retreating tide. They walked in silence, side by side, Charlie trotting ahead to sniff at shells and seaweed, the sound of the surf washing away the last remnants of sleep. Megan led the way to the driftwood log where she and Atlas had sat so many times. Rain or shine, joy or heartbreak. She knelt in the sand, fingers trembling, and placed Atlas's old collar on the log, arranging the wildflowers around it. The name tag gleamed in the dawn light, a quiet reminder that love, real love, never leaves us, even when it's invisible. Jason settled beside her, draping an arm over her shoulders. Charlie, ever sensitive, nuzzled against Megan's knee before flopping down in the sand, tongue lolling, eyes half closed in contentment. Megan drew a deep breath, letting the ocean's rhythm slow her heartbeat. She spoke softly, voice thick with emotion, but also steady. "Sure. Atlas, you were my first family, my protector, my friend. Everything I know about loyalty and courage and love, I learned from you. I miss you, but I promise to keep your spirit alive. In every act of kindness, in every second chance I give, I'll think of you." A single tear slipped down her cheek, but her smile was real, gentle and radiant, like the rising sun. She reached for Jason's hand, grounding herself in the warmth of the present. "Thank you for understanding, for letting me love him so fully." Jason squeezed her hand. "I love him too. I see him in you, in us, in how we care for Charlie, for each other." They sat together, letting the moment stretch. Megan scattered the wildflower petals into the surf, watching them dance on the waves. Each petal, a memory, a wish, a fragment of love sent out into the world. She felt Atlas's presence in the hush of the wind, the flash of a seagull's wings, the gentle strength of Charlie pressed against her side. Charlie, once so timid and withdrawn, had bloomed in their care. Now he ran along the shore, chasing the surf, ears flapping, his bark echoing across the sand. Megan watched him and knew that every goodbye she'd ever survived had prepared her for these new beginnings. After a while, Jason pulled out his phone, and together they watched the video of their wedding day at the clinic. They laughed through tears at the image of Megan in her wrinkled dress, Jason's crooked tie, and Atlas lying between them, noble and unbothered by the chaos. Harper's voice could be heard, sniffling and cheering at the same time. The moment was bittersweet, but Megan felt no regret, only gratitude. They walked the length of the beach, talking about Atlas, about Charlie, about everything they'd learned. Megan spoke of how loss had shaped her, made her kinder, softer, stronger. True perfection isn't found in flawless plans or fairy tale endings, she said, watching Charlie roll in the sand. It's found in our willingness to love, to lose, to start again. Atlas gave us that. Jason nodded. Every goodbye can be a seed for the next act of compassion. That's what you taught me. As the sun climbed higher, Megan knelt by the driftwood, tucking the collar firmly among the flowers. She spoke, her words meant for Atlas, but echoing outward, to anyone who needed to hear them. Honor those you've lost by loving again. Choose compassion, choose presence, and rescue whenever you can. The world needs more kindness. A family walking their golden retriever paused nearby. The little girl stared at Charlie, then at the wildflowers, and smiled. "Did your dog go to heaven?" she asked quietly. Megan's eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded. "He did. And he sent us Charlie, so we could love him too." The girl grinned, hugging her own dog. Her parents smiled at Megan and Jason, understanding something unspoken. As Megan, Jason, and Charlie walked away from the driftwood altar, their shadows stretched long across the sand. Megan felt the circle of love growing, rippling outward from Atlas to Charlie, from their little family to the wider world. She knew their story, once marked by heartbreak, had become a beacon for compassion, inspiring others to open their hearts, to cherish what truly matters. The future was open and bright. And as Megan looked at Jason and Charlie, her hand in Jason's, Charlie running free, she knew that Atlas's legacy would never fade. It lived in every act of kindness, every rescued soul, every promise kept against all odds. Together, they walked into the sunrise, Atlas's spirit alive in every step, their love story continuing, full of hope and new beginnings.